So last week, President Biden announced that he would forgive up to $20,000 of student loan debt for qualifying borrowers who make less than $125,000 per year. But that wasn't all. Biden also said he would create a new income-driven repayment system for college borrowers, IDR for short. The IDR aspect of Biden's plan attracted less scrutiny than the direct forgiveness aspect, which will cost at least $300 billion in the immediate future. But in the long term, this aggressive move toward an income-driven model of repaying college loans will probably have a bigger impact, and that impact could be catastrophic. In fact, unless the government does something else to constrain colleges and universities' ability to set their own prices, IDR could break the entire higher education financing system and lead to skyrocketing costs for taxpayers. There's some IDR programs available right now, but Biden's approach would vastly expand this option. So the existing plans require borrowers to pay 10, 15, or 20% of their income for 2 decades, at which point the rest of the loan is forgiven. So Biden would make IDR much more appealing than it is currently. So according to the Biden-Harris debt relief plan, borrowers will pay just 5% of their income, or 10% if they took out graduate student loans, for either 10 or 20 years, depending on how much money they owe. The income threshold will be raised from 150% above the poverty line to 225%, which covers a lot more people, and the punitive interest rates are going to be eliminated. So all in all, this IDR model will be extremely appealing for a large number of borrowers. It's a great deal. We should expect the percentage of borrowers who are repaying via that method to increase substantially in the coming years. But without further changes to the federal student loan program, this is actually going to be a huge problem. That's because both the borrowers and the universities will have increased incentive to bilk the people who actually make the loans, the taxpayers. So let's get into this. Under the current system, a prospective student needs a certain amount of money to pay for tuition at a university. Let's say it's $50,000. They borrow that sum from the government, i.e. the taxpayers. Later, the borrower pays it back with interest. The university's incentives are already less than ideal. Might feel free to raise the price of tuition to, let's say, $60,000, satisfied that the student really wants the degree and will thus borrow more money and deal with the consequences afterward. To the extent that the government loan program disguises upfront costs, it arguably already contributes to rising tuition rates. Multiple economic studies have found that this is the case. Under IDR, though, this situation is going to get much worse because now the university and the borrowers have incentive to cooperate and screw the taxpayers. So for the borrower, it actually doesn't matter if tuition costs $15,000 or $5 million. The borrower will be repaying the same amount, 5% of income for 10 years, regardless of the size of the loan or the cost of tuition. Since it makes no difference to the borrower, the university might as well raise prices astronomically. This way, the university pockets more money. The borrower doesn't even have to pay it back. Something close to this scheme already exists in law schools, which have loan repayment assistance programs, LRAPs, L-R-A-P-S. According to the leftist writer Matt Brunig, who is the inspiration for a lot of this radar, the arrangement is very likely to produce increased tuition as universities and students figure out that they can essentially cooperate in this game to beat the house. Brunig writes, just as schools have new incentives to push debt loads higher in an IDR-dominated world, so do students. Above, I say that for students planning to enroll in IDR, $15,000 of student debt is no different than $100,000 of student debt. This is not quite right, though. A student planning to enroll in IDR actually benefits from taking the maximum amount of debt possible. Student loans are initially paid to schools to cover tuition and fees, but what's left after tuition and fees is dispersed as cash to the students, ostensibly to cover living expenses. In a conventional student loan, you have reason to live frugally and take out as little debt as possible. But if you're planning to go on IDR, then your incentive flips and you're leaving money on the table if you don't take out the maximum loan possible. Brunig notes that Australia also uses IDR, but in Australia, the government prohibits universities from charging obscenely high tuition rates. If we're going to make the leap into an IDR-dominant college financing system, then we may need the government to also play a much bigger role in setting college prices, something it probably should have been doing even before the Biden policy change, writes Brunig. Otherwise, we may very well see more unwanted cost bloat beyond what we already have. So Brunig approaches these issues from the left, but he's not wrong that these policies make for a dreaded combination. And let's be clear what these 3 policies are. 1, letting students get publicly subsidized loans. 2, allowing the borrowers to pay a percentage of their income instead of paying back the entire loan. And 3, permitting universities to charge whatever the hell they want for tuition.